we do not observe so far countries going from open access back to natural states. But clearly something like the immigration issue in the United States illustrates how imperfect is our open access society and how dangerous it is with respect to moving backward to a natural state as a very likely possibility. I can think of a lot of other aspects I might add about American policy these days that worry me along the same lines. So I do think that that's possible. As I said, so far we haven't seen that happen. We still are an open access society in general. That is, in general, the structure and the way the system works is still one that characterizes, even though there's all kinds of exceptions to it, like our policies toward agriculture or various kinds of monopolies that exist at certain levels, and the immigration issue, which qualify that statement.
Yes, Ernie.
Ernesto Pernia from the School of Economics. Professor North, you haven't mentioned religion as an institution. It's a major institution, including in this country, as you know. There are pieces of literature that say that religion tends to be more constricting or constraining vis-a-vis economic growth than permissive or facilitating of economic growth. So, in your research, how do you see religion vis-a-vis economic growth? There are economists who say that, Robert Barro, for example, who says that religion may be adversarial rather than friendly to economic growth. Thank you.
That's a good question again, and one that, if I'd had time, we talk about it at great length in our book, but in 40 minutes I tried to constrain it. But religion obviously plays a big part. In fact, ever since Weber wrote The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, which was a pioneering work trying to show the way in which religious beliefs have affected the belief system and in turn, therefore, shaped the kind of way beliefs have evolved, which played a big part. I don't agree necessarily with Weber's story, but I think it's a good illustration of it. Well, religious beliefs play a ambivalent or a very different set of policies in different contexts. Some religious beliefs tend to make the system more intolerant of change and of various kinds of order, and Muslim fundamentalism certainly is of that kind. Other religious beliefs, if I believe Weber's story about what happened in the Western world in the 12th to the 17th century, was a gradual evolution of religious beliefs that encouraged more diversity, more variety, and indeed more experimentation, all of which are underlying and necessary conditions for the world we have. So I think religion plays a very different role in different settings. So that's not a good answer, but it's as good as I'm going to give you.
Good afternoon, Professor North. I am Crislyn Torres, and I am teaching political science in this university. In fact, I'm using one of your articles as part of my reading material in a methodology course that I teach, which introduces new institutionalism in political science. My question is on what has been, for the last 10 years, the most hotly contested institutional question in this country, which is on the attempts of the successive administrations to change the country's form of government from the current presidential system to a parliamentary one. The justifications given are not only the politically desirable goals of increasing political accountability and democratic empowerment, but also the economically desirable goal of achieving faster growth rates. Now, on the other hand, opponents of this move by the government have argued that while there is no question that political institutions matter, the macro level, they do not matter at the macro level of the general forms of government, but at the micro level of the specific institutional design, specific institutional features of the different political institutions, such as the design of party system, electoral system, veto power of the executive, and the powers and functions of legislative committees. Now, as an economist who has frequently commented on the dilemma that baffled political scientists, could I get your comment on this local institutional debate? When you say that institutions matter, would it really matter whether a form of government is presidential or parliamentary in the process of economic change? Thank you.
Well, that's a good question, too, and you won't get a good answer again. You won't, because the political scientists haven't provided one. Don't misunderstand me. I attack economists more than I do political scientists. So if I get the right question, I'll give economists the business too. But one of the things that's surely missing is we know a lot about how an open access economy works. In fact, Joseph Schumpeter laid out a very elaborate and really spectacular framework that is very close to the way in which I envision an open access economic system working. It works by dynamic process, by creative destruction and continual innovation. Now, what that looks like in a political market is something that's very hard to specify. I do think there's one critical thing, and I made it actually implicitly when I talked about my Argentine story, and that is, you don't want to have a polity that can overturn easily fundamental rules of economic organization. If they can, then you're always open to what I observed in Argentina, that you'll go back to the limited access society over and over again, because, and John made the point very nicely, nobody likes competition. Us academics, least of all. We are always trying to keep monopolies from ourselves. We're not too good at it, you understand, but we nevertheless try to do it. But everybody wants to have some protection from the vicissitudes of a world of vigorous competition. And so we spend a lot of time trying to do so. So it's not surprising that it's so problem. But what is concerning us, and what I beat my political science colleagues over the head all the time, is they have not developed a framework that really gets at this issue. The reason why is simple things like elections don't tell you a thing. Now, that's not quite that. I'm exaggerating. But, you know, you just had an election in Russia where, you know, Putin's stooge got in and got 75 or 80% of the election. Is that what you have in mind? Not a bit. You really want to have, and one of the things that characterizes political competition that matters is you have so many interest groups that no interest group can really catch hold of the system. So you have political groups, political interest groups that prevent any other interest group from getting too strong. And that's very important. So, but I want to have political scientists really do a job on this, and they haven't done it. It makes me mad. And so I'm hoping all of you in this room will go home and get to work on this problem, because it's the big hole in our understanding. One of many big holes, I might, but that's a big one.
Before I cue the next speaker, I want to know if any of the students present have a question for Professor North, because we've heard a lot from the faculty. Are there any? Yes, this student over here.
I study sociology here. I'm Diliman de la Cruz. My question, Professor North, is from the different countries you study, how did they build trust and cooperation? Because you said that it's a requisite for economic growth, that there should be informal norms that will encourage trust and cooperation. But from other countries' experiences, how did this come about?
Oh, well, that's a good question. You'll get a lot of the answers again. All you get from me is a lot of the answers. One of the things that we've done a lot of work in experimental economics recently, and that I'm very high on, is we have observed degrees of trust in different kinds of marketplaces. And the first thing that we have found that makes a big difference is where people move from self-sufficiency to markets, you engender increases in trust. I have a very dear friend, she's a friend of John's of mine, as a matter of fact, Jean Ensminger, who is an anthropologist that was at Washington University. And Jean worked with a tribe in Kenya for 25 years. And she observed that tribe moving from complete self-sufficiency into gradually, with cattle, moving into the market. And as she observed that in doing experimental work with them, that cooperation and trust expanded as they did so. Now, she started, not only she, but a lot of other anthropologists started doing it, but she really began something that's now become a major industry in the social sciences, which is trying to understand the conditions that increase the amount of trust of people in different settings. And one of the things we observe as a continual phenomenon, as you expand markets, as you develop more complex economic organization, political and social organization, necessarily you're forced to learn more trust. And so trust evolves in this kind of context. Now, I'm not giving a very good answer because actually there's books and books being written now on ways in which trust can evolve in different kinds of settings that are being done now by anthropologists and by sociologists and economists. The big thing is, and John mentioned it in his introductory remarks, as you get more complex exchange, you are necessarily forced to develop more trust, because the exchange is never well protected against predators and so on. And so it requires really that you evolve a framework that encourages people to cooperate with each other. The more reciprocal relationship you have, the more cooperative behavior you tend to develop, and the more, therefore, you tend to develop a system of trust. I'm not doing a very good job because it's a very complex subject, but it's, again, one of the major frontiers, because one of the things that I want to insist on is that if you're going to develop a high-income country, an open access society, a key feature has got to be that you have complex exchange and that transaction costs be low. And what makes transaction costs low is a lot of things, of which trust and reliance and so on are key features.
Okay, for our next question, any more students? Yes.
My name is Peter C. I understand that...
Excuse me, what's your institutional affiliation?
UP CSSP, Sociology and Philosophy. I understand that the enforcement of property rights system is a fundamental feature of this open society or open economy. But what if you have a situation where this enforcement or such system in fact discourages innovation, or at least increases the cost of making innovations?
I'm not sure I understand the question.